we're going to work on a Brahms Intermezzo. So first of all, before you go any further, I've sent a link with a recording. I recommend giving it 2 good listens. It's not very long, it's just a couple of minutes, but listen through it 2 whole times just so you can get it in your ear. Once it's in your ear, I think a lot of the things that we do together will make more sense, and I will play you little snippets here and there to point things out. But if you don't start off by listening to this twice, I think a lot of what I say isn't going to make very much sense. Now, Brahms is a Romantic composer, and you'll recall that we've looked at 2 Romantic works so far this semester. One is we looked at the Schubert Earl King last unit, and then this unit we looked at the Chopin Prelude in E minor. You'll recall that when we did the Chopin, one of the things we talked about is just how long the phrases were and how long it took to finally get to an authentic cadence at the very end of the piece. So we're going to see in this Brahms piece that we're looking at a lot of features of Romanticism that we haven't yet talked about. Now, one of the things to know about Brahms is that even though he's a Romantic composer, he's always looking back at classical forms, and he's also a composer that still likes to use a lot of functional harmony. So let's go ahead and take a look at this very beginning. Oh, you know, actually, before I do that, this is a tricky form to analyze, and I'm going to go ahead and just show you what I think the form is for this piece. You'll recall that it kind of has this more slow kind of, I don't know what the right word is, but it sort of takes its time, it kind of paces through this introduction. And I'm actually going to call this opening and introduction. And if we jump to the very end, you'll see that we have the same music as our opening here at the very end. Take a look. Right, here's our opening, da, 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 da. And then we get a nice cadence right there. And if you look at the very end, it's the exact same thing as our opening. So in a sense, this opening and this ending, the introduction and this coda, are kind of like bookends on this form. Now, if we look at the rest of it, we get a good old-fashioned rounded binary. Here we have an A section after our introduction, right? So a rounded binary is going to be ABA. So here we have an introduction. Then we have an A section. We get a repeat, right? Repeat the A section. Then we get a B section, which is contrasting, and we get some new stuff. Then you'll notice at measure 24, with the pickup in 25, da, 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 dum, ba, dum, da, dum. It goes back to here, right? Da, 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 dum, ba, dum. Same as the A. Da, 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 dum. Of course, this time it's different. So this is an A prime. And then we get a repeat at the end of that. And then we get our coda. So this is an ABA prime continuous rounded binary. And so he's using, Brahms is using just a very simple classical form, an introduction and a coda with a rounded binary, continuous rounded binary. Now, one of the things that Brahms likes to do is, even though this is an A minor, he's constantly finding new ways to kind of pull away from A minor. And in fact, let's just talk about getting to measure 2. It doesn't sound like it's an A minor by the middle of measure 2. Listen. right away by measure 2, he gives us 5 of C major and then a C major chord. So even though it's in the key of A minor, his first sort of move is to C major. Strange. Then we get this alto part. And we could hear it as a do, ti, do. We could hear it as a so, fi, so. We have lots of ways, but clearly this D sharp is pulling to E. So now we're getting a lot of sort of D sharp to E. And then we get another 4, 5, 1 in the key of C major. So all of this A minor stuff keeps pulling to C major, and then we get these D sharps. So there's almost kind of like a battle between A minor and C major. Like A minor, no, it's going to go to C. No, it's, and that's something that we definitely see more in the Romantic period, is not necessarily feeling like we're in just one key, that it kind of pulls and moves away. Then we get into measure 5, and we get this rhythmic syncopation, which sort of blurs what all the harmony is, because the left and right hands are out of sync. This is starting in measure 4. With those left and right hands not in sync, it can be difficult to tell what the harmony is. Right? We hear a G major harmony here in first inversion, but then what about this? Can we call these suspensions maybe? That these are all just suspended notes, and really the harmony is here? And then similarly, are these suspended notes? And then the harmony is really here. So by having these left and right hands out of sync, every single beat is a suspension and constantly needing to resolve to the next one. Finally, we get a nice cadential 6/4, and we're waiting for a 5 chord. So we start hearing the A minor in measure 6. Definitive cadence in A minor. Except, there's something kind of weird about how we get to this A minor. First of all, what do you notice about my resolution on this A minor chord? You might notice that there is no C or E. There's no chord, it's just A. Which makes it sound very kind of dark and menacing and hollow, right? Just this unison. The other thing is the way that the bass gets there. Here we have a so, do, right in the bass. Here is our cadential 6, 4, 5, fi, so, right? There's our so, fi, so from the alto line, and now suddenly there it is. He turned his alto line into a bass line. So, fi, so, me, do. So there's so, me, do. What is going on with that me? So that C natural is not part of the 5 chord. So like this is supposed to be a 5 harmony, and suddenly the composer just jumps to a C, which isn't in the 5 chord. A lot of people interpret this as some kind of free anticipation, is what they call it. The idea is that we're anticipating A minor, and we kind of jump to a note early in A minor before we get there. It's just sort of an unusual thing. But probably having that C before we get to A minor, that C is in our ear, so we kind of hear it as part of the chord. So just to kind of do a quick recap of this intro. Keeps pulling away from C major. We've got this kind of so, fi, so, kind of pulling it to the note E, but we keep getting motion back to C. Then we get a lot of left and right hand not quite in sync with each other, creating all these suspensions, making it difficult to tell what the harmony is. And then finally a cadence in A minor with actually no chord on the A minor chord and an unusual free anticipation in the bass getting there. Right, that's a lot of stuff. A lot of ways to kind of blur the music. Now, what if we could take this so, fi, so, that was an alto line, and then later a bass line, and now we can turn it into the melody. So, fi, so, me, ti. Right, there it is. So one of the things that Brahms is really known for is motivic unity, right? Our so, fi, so got passed from there to there, and now we see it in the melody, right? Taking one idea and finding really clever ways to use it throughout. So this next section is all about the G sharp. I'm going to play you just a little bit of this, and this G sharp is going to keep popping up. And it's always going to pop up in ways that we don't expect. And we're going to see this music move from A minor and modulate to a new key. So I'm going to play from measure 9 to the first ending, and I'd like you to listen for 2 things as I play this. First of all, I don't want you to listen for the mistakes I make, because Brahms is a difficult composer to play at the piano, even an easier work like this one. It's kind of out of my league. But I want you to be listening for the G sharps and tell me about these G sharps. Then I want you to listen for the modulation to the new key going into the first ending. By the first ending, we have a cadence and a new key. Can you tell me what that new key is, and then can you also tell me how did we get to that key? So here's starting at measure 9. Play that very well, but hopefully I played it well enough that you could hear the G sharps and the modulations. I'm actually going to play it one more time so I can get a few more of the notes, but again, I want you to be thinking, how do we in fact get to the new key, and what is it? At what point are we in the new key? How we did. The new key was in fact C major. Here's our so, so, do. And this is a very sort of classical key to go from, right? The relative major, going from A minor to C major. Now, he didn't get there in a classical way, though. We kept hearing this G sharp. And what Brahms did is he reinterpreted the G sharp, which is a T, right? This is T in key of A minor. He reinterpreted it as A flat. And you can't see what I'm writing. There we go. This G sharp became the A flat as lay, eventually going to so. Right, the A flat, so we keep hearing the G sharp, and then eventually it's a lay so in the key of C major. So he used sort of like a common tone, re-enharmonically spelled, to get from A minor to C major in kind of a clever way. However, we can actually find a pivot harmony that will get us from A minor to C major. There's a pivot chord. And let's do a little bit of Roman numeral analysis. We're going to be in the key of A minor, and then there will be a pivot chord in that next system between A minor and C major. What I'd like you to do is go ahead and do a Roman numeral analysis in A minor going forwards, but then I want you to go backwards in C major and see if you can find a pivot chord between A minor and C major. Go ahead and give this a try on your own. Go ahead and hit pause and try it, and then when you've given up or I think you've got it, go ahead and unpause. All right, going forward, here are all my notes in the chord. A minor, I'll skip this one. E major. Now that I know this one is E major, then I can figure out what this is. D sharp, F sharp, A, C. This is 7, 4, 3 of 5. And then we get the same harmonies again. This is 7, 7 of 5, 5. Here we have FAC, which is 6. You'll also know that FAC can work in the key of C major as 4. So here's our pivot chord. We get 1, 7 of 5, 5, 1, 7 of 5, 5, 6, which can become 4 in the new key. Then we get F sharp, A, C. So this is, now we're in the key of C major. And this is 7 of 5, which takes us to key potential 6, 4, 5, 1. Yeah, that's a tricky one. It's tricky how Brahms uses that pivot chord, and then also the fact that the G sharp, which should be in the key of A minor, gets respelled as the A flat in C major. Now, there's a little bit more that I want to talk about with this melody in this section. There is a lot of use of non-chord tones, again, to kind of blur what the harmony is. Let's take this first G sharp, for example. So the harmony is A minor, but the melody note is G sharp. I don't know about you, but you probably get points taken off if you had A minor and you harmonize it with a G sharp. Well, let's agree that it's not actually part of the harmony. It's a note that we are jumping to it, right? We're jumping to this wrong note and then resolving it by step in the other direction. We jumped too far and resolved by step. And this is where you're going, ooh, I know the name of it, but I can't remember because I don't remember things from Theory 1. And this is where I tell you, oh yes, this is an appoggiatura. Right, we jumped too far to the wrong note, and then resolved it by step to the right one. Here's another note that doesn't fit the harmony either. We have a D sharp in the melody with E major in the D sharp in the melody with E major in the harmony. I'll start at the repeat sign. So here's our harmony, and there's our melody note. And then of course it finally resolves up by step. So again, we have E, G sharp, B, but we have that non-chord tone, that dissonant note here. What do we call a non-chord tone that comes from the same note, but then resolves up by step? What do we call those? Same note and then up by step. What's the name of it? It's not a suspension because that one goes down. This one is the retardation. Right, it's slowing down our harmonic motion by taking its time going up from Fi to So, right? That's our So, Fi, So again. So we're getting a lot of these appoggiaturas, retardations. Here's another example of an appoggiatura. Right, it jumps down to da 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 da, wrong note, then resolves up, and then he does it again. Da, 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 wrong note and resolves up. So on every single one of these strong beats, he always goes to the wrong note in the harmony before correcting. And then here we have another example of the left and right hands out of sync. This section down here. We have a cadential 6/4, 5/7, and then 1. But look, when it goes to the 1 chord, we have all the wrong notes. This is measure 15 with the pickup. So here's our downbeat of 16. That aren't part of the harmony. Well, let's see if we can figure those out. The one going down, that comes from the same note. It's a late note resolving down. That's our 4/3 suspension. And then the two upper notes that are late resolving up are both retardations. So the entire harmony in the right hand is actually some sort of non-chord tone that needs to get to where it's going. So it's, again, a really great way to sort of add dissonance and to kind of blur what the harmony is by having our left and right hands out of sync. So just sort of a recap. We took our So, Fi, So, turned it into the melody of the new music. We essentially had functional harmony, 1, 7 to 5. We had a pivot chord that takes us to the relative major. But we also had kind of a G sharp that got reinterpreted when it moved into C major. And then we have a lot of use of non-chord tones, especially appoggiaturas and retardations, and then also a suspension that kind of help us blur the harmony and give us this sort of more romantic sound. One other thing that I want to mention about Brahms as a romantic composer and his use of piano texture is we're not seeing any of the Mozart kind of classical Alberti basses, where it kind of fits nicely in the hand. If you look at these left hand parts, they span way more than an octave, which makes them difficult for violinists to play, because I'm a violinist and not a real pianist. Because I suddenly have to put my hand in more than one position to be able to get the notes. So this is also another sort of feature of romantic piano writing, as we see these sort of larger left-hand ranges in his texture, in the texture and the accompanying rhythm. Well, let's keep going. So we made it to the B section, and we're starting in C major. And what I'd like to do is I'm going to play you from this part down to measure 20. And I want you to pay attention to the melody note and the bass line. The melody notes and the bass line. What do you notice about the melody notes and the bass line in the first two measures, and the melody notes and bass line in the next two measures? One more time. Well, this is another one of Brahms' tricks. C sharp, D, B, C. Now look at those four notes down here. C sharp, D, B, C. He takes his melody line and he turns it into his bass. Then we have the bass line, B flat, A flat, G. And he takes that and he turns it into his melody. B flat, A flat, G. This is, of course, something we've already seen Bach do. And Bach is definitely a very large influence on Brahms as a composer. There was a big revival of Bach's music in the mid-1800s, and Brahms certainly would have been aware of Bach as a composer and his tremendous output. So anyway, we refer to this as invertible counterpoint. Now, take a look at measures 21 and 22. I dare you to listen to that and be able to figure out where the beat is, because I can't. When I hear this, this is one of those places where Brahms has done a lot of trickery with his left and right hands to make sure you can't hear where the beat is going. The left and right hands are out of sync, and also the left hand, instead of having a pattern of four notes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, creates a pattern of three notes. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. This rhythmic device is known as hemiola, where we create a pattern that distorts what the meter is. I'm not going to put that word on the test, but I will write it here for you. So Brahms has created a pattern, so we no longer can tell what the beat is, or it doesn't seem to fit the meter. And then, of course, we can also see that the right hand is always just a little bit early on each attack. We get this whole two measures is an F sharp half diminished 7. It looks like it's in 6/5 inversion here, and then it's in root position there. But this is where things get strange. At measure 123, we get a B chord in the left hand, but we still have A minor in the right hand. Now, there are two ways that we could analyze this, and I'm going to give you some options. One way is we can try stacking it into thirds, starting on B. B, no D, F sharp, A, C, E. This looks like B, flat 11 with a flat 9. Wow. What's going on here? Because he's got that A minor in one hand, he's got B and F sharp in the other hand. You'll notice that since it's an 11 chord, it doesn't have the D sharp. Now, we can also think of it as just more of Brahms' rhythmic displacement. Brahms probably wasn't trying to write jazz harmony, but of course that's what he inadvertently did when he has his left and right hand out of sync. Because you'll remember, this A minor chord is still hanging over from this F sharp half diminished 7. We still have the top of it, the ACE, is still hanging out. And then he moves to, the left hand switches, but A, C, and E are late to the next party until we get this. And then when they finally move to the new harmony, we get an actual B major. Actually, this is B7, which will take us to an E chord, which brings us back to A minor. Right? When we go back to A prime, we need to get back to the home key with it. That was the point of our B to A prime in our continuous binary, that B needs to get back there. So really it's just a circle of fifths. B7 to E, E7 to A, and then we're back home. I do feel that I've given you a whole lot of information on this piece, and if this piece shows up on the exam, it will largely focus on the first page. So why don't we go ahead and take a break there, and I will have one more Brahms work as our other lesson.